All right. Well, let's move on to the next story here. So, Canada's state sponsored media extends its reach. Google must inject $100 million annually into Canadian media for allowing their news content to be displayed through its series of digital networks, primarily Google Search. Until recently, the government proposed that nearly 75% of these funds go to public broadcasters like Bell Media and CBC Radio Canada. However, now the Liberal government has a new plan. The lion's share of the money, 63%, will go to newspapers and digital media platforms, with broadcasters receiving only 30% and CBC capped at 7%. Despite the substantial drop in funds allocated for the CBC, critics argue that this number should be $0 because they are taking lifeline funds away from small, private media companies who do not receive $1.2 billion in annual federal funding. The Heritage Minister defended the decision, stating that excluding the public broadcaster entirely would devalue its essential role. So let me ask you, what do you think the CBC's essential role is?
Taking $1.2 billion worth of taxpayer money and doing absolutely nothing with it? Like, just, it's a state-sponsored, state-controlled media outlet, right? They're out of touch with what people want to watch on TV. They have not migrated to the digital realm very well at all. In general, they're just used as a megaphone for the government. That's really all it is. And it's been like that for a really long time, whether there's conservatives or Democrats or liberals, rather, in power. The difference really being that Trudeau gives them an extra $120 to $150 million a year than conservatives had. And they're doing whatever they can to make sure that they stay afloat because they think it's such a crucial component to Canadian culture. But really, again, it's how they control the mainstream media. But if you kind of look at how funds are dispersed by the government to a lot of these platforms, I don't think enough people realize that every major news outlet, every major mainstream news outlet is one way or another subsidized by the government. Even the ones that they're considered like right wing. Like they say, I was reading something the other day, I think they said CTV was like center right. I'm like, what the fuck world do you live in? National Post was far right. I'm like, National Post is moderate at best. But these guys are all subsidized by the government. And look, the issue you have with this is pretty clear. When the government's funding media, the media has a bias because the media wants to continue getting funded. And when you live in this new realm where they are not making as much money off ad dollars because they're not migrating well into the digital space, they become more and more dependent on the government. So when that happens, they have to toe the line of the government. Like I was going to say, they have to toe the government's line stronger than before, essentially, right? Now, when you look at what's happening here, it's actually a smart strategic move from Trudeau because they're already handing out billions of dollars to mainstream media platforms. Why would you give them another 100 million, right? So you think about mainstream media, and they're like sort of this, like the highway of information, right? So the government owns the highway of information, right? But you have all these side streets that are below it that people like you and I live on, right? You and I are more back alley, but you know what I mean. So if you just give more money to the highway you already control, what are you really accomplishing? And the answer is really not much, right? Especially 100 million. That's peanuts to guys that are getting 1.2, 1.3 from the government. So they took this 100 million, and what they're doing now is they're dispersing it to all these other platforms through a specific fund, and you have to apply for it. And when you apply for this, you have to get government approval, right? And who is the government that's approving it? The Liberal government. So what they're doing is now they're using this 100 million. Well, they're using 63 million of it actually to basically fill the side streets with all their media. So what they're doing is they're filling all the cracks, in my opinion, so that the entire narrative from the highway through the side streets on the on and off ramps and everything is going to kind of be this liberal powerhouse that is paid by the government that's going to continue pushing whatever their agenda is. You know what I mean? And the problem with that is, look, a lot of times news is just news. But we also know that probably 30 to 40% of the time, it's really politically motivated. And when you've only got one side of a story being told, you're not getting the whole truth. And like, I always implore people to like find other sources than me too. Like I have a bias. You have a bias. We all do. It's fine. But what they're doing with this is they're fortifying the bias that this country is going to have towards liberals and to the liberal agenda. And they're squashing a lot of the other voices sort of in the conservative realm. The thing is, you need opposing voices. When you have ideas that aren't great, you need people to come to the table with better ideas, and you need to kind of negotiate. find some common ground, and that's what's better for the people. But we're not allowing that. And my concern runs pretty deep here, actually. Like, first of all, I think it's a very authoritarian move that I don't think people are identifying, because it doesn't really affect them right now. It doesn't feel like that, but that's what it is. When the state controls all of the media, that's totalitarian. That's pretty wild. And that's kind of where we're going with this. And this $63 million a year that's just coming out of Google's pocket will go a long way to fortify those side streets, because there's not nearly as much money in that space. Like you and I, we're not making that kind of money. I'm not making any money doing this. So if you can fund a group with $63 million, they can just keep going whether they're making money or not. You can basically just keep pushing your messaging. So for me, it's a pretty dangerous thing that's happening. It's a smart strategic move from Trudeau, but it does put the Conservatives at a disadvantage, because obviously they can't get their voice out. And then when you look at some of the censorship tools that are being used on social media, now it's even harder to get your voice out if you're conservative, because those are all unpopular opinions, so they all need to be censored. But here's the thing. How does this play out in the next election? And for me, this is actually one of the key things that is going to give Trudeau a chance to win again in 2025. He's controlling the mainstream media. He's going to be controlling all the side street media platforms as well. And he's going to be censoring all of the conservative speech. So I think this is pretty concerning. But again, I got to tip my hat to the guy, because it's a smart move to keep him in power.
Yeah. And see, it's funny because I am definitely biased, but I'm not it's so crazy to me that I've been put in this box of conservative when my values haven't changed much since I was a young teenager. And I would definitely consider myself a liberal, like a classic liberal. Like the definition of liberalism is a political and moral philosophy based on the rights of the individual, liberty, consent of the governed, political equality, right to private property, and equality before the law. This new idea of liberalism, or our current Liberal Party, all of this, they go directly against all of those things. They're all about group rights. They're not about individual rights at all. They're actually trying to strip away individual rights in the name of affording group rights. They're not to the idea of free enterprise and all of this kind of stuff. They want the government to be involved in every single aspect of the economy, even to these points of media. It's like, okay, the CBC cannot keep up on its own because it's utter trash.
It's useless. It should sink, and it should just sink to the bottom of the ocean.
Their content is if they can't survive in the marketplace, it's not on the taxpayers in order to keep their propaganda machine alive. And so you look at the bias of the CBC, they have to attack anybody other than Trudeau, because Poilievre has made it very clear that he does not intend on continuing to fund these people at all. So to them, this election is literally a matter of life or death for so they have a built-in policy and to support the Liberal Party.
But you know what? Just to add to your point, that's going to be the exact same situation for all these other smaller media platforms that are getting part of the $63 million a year. So you're going to have hundreds, thousands of small media channels that are going, look, we're on the government tit right now, and we're getting $17,000 per journalist. So you scale up your operation because you're getting more and more money to keep things going. They're gonna go, if we don't keep the Liberals in power, this is gone, and that's it. We're out of business. So you're gonna have this entire army that's gonna be pushing back against the Conservatives because it's life or death. Sorry, go on.
No, it's okay. And I mean, they're creating a propaganda machine, top to bottom, and like. I look at this as no different than something like Pravda in the Soviet Union. It's a straight up propaganda machine. And one of the things that they put forward with all these Bill C-11s and all of this kind of stuff is, well, we're going to promote Canadian values. Well, look at the people that are in charge of these policies. They absolutely hate all of Canada and its history. So what values of Canadian, you know what they mean? It's this whole diversity.
Of course, that's what it is. It's letting more men into girls' change rooms. Fucking.
And so, to them, that's a Canadian value. But then you look back at anything in Canadian history, they despise Canada, man. Why are we letting people that despise Canada tell everyone and promote Canadian values?
No, I agree. I mean, it's the same group of people now that are getting rid of Dundas Street. I mean, I did a little research on that guy. He was an abolitionist. Yeah. It's wild that we're changing it to some now like an African tribal name that's actually got some roots in in what's it called?
In slavery.
Yeah, in slavery. Sorry, yeah, that actually have some roots in slavery, and I'm like, this is wild. But that's
Good luck finding any tribe in Africa that goes back hundreds of years that didn't participate in that, because guess what? Everybody did.
Yeah,
There was nobody. We were not unique in that at all. That was actually the best part of that whole you remember that Woman King movie that came out with Viola Davis? It was all about the tribe of female African warriors.
No, I don't.
Yeah. Okay. So it was a 2-for-1. It was all about Black power and women empowerment. This movie.
Sounds like right up my alley. Surprised I didn't see it.
But then the actual historical account, this whole woman tribe, dude, first of all, they got absolutely slaughtered in any main battle that they came up against with anybody that wasn't just sticks and stones type tribes. And second, their whole tribe was very pro-slavery. They would go frequently and enslave other tribes and stuff. So you're like, this whole narrative of being like, we are the, whether it be Canadians or Americans or just Westerns, it's Westernism in general.
Yeah.
It's like, these are the ills of humanity are being blamed on Westernism. And it's like all of their proposed solutions and the virtuous ones are guilty of the exact same crimes.
Yeah, like I keep saying, man, we live in a charade. The whole world is just make believe now. We just, it's absolutely insane to me that we continue to do these things. If you enjoyed this clip, you can watch the full episode here.